All right, hey guys. So with the off season approaching, the sports off season, especially our hockey players, soon to be coming back for the off season, I wanted to kind of dive into a couple different topics regarding, let's say, the off season preparation. So I think it'd be appropriate to start with the first phase with it, which is the GPP phase, or the general physical preparedness phase. So what is GPP? All right. GPP is basically refers to how in shape a person is, like in an overall sense. So if, like, the pictures that are depicted here are old pictures of the Soviet Union hockey team. All right, because a lot of these concepts came out of the Soviet Union from way back in the day. I would say even the 60s. So GPP is regarded as the foundation of strength and athletic performance, and you'll see why. Normally, the exercises performed are unrelated to their primary sport. So, for the case of hockey players, they might play soccer, they may play tennis or basketball, and vice versa. Just something unrelated in terms of movement patterns and maybe speed of movement, or different energy system, just to kind of build a different form of fitness. And another way to explain general physical preparedness is to emphasize different muscle contractions. So to build an overall sound base of strength. So just a story about these the pictures on the right. So the old Soviet Union hockey team, I believe it says from 1964 to 1988, they won 6 gold medals and 1 silver medal. Like, they were regarded as like the cream of the crop. They were unbeatable. All right. And I remember watching a documentary about how they trained for hours and hours, both on and off the ice. And I was kind of watching some of the videos, and they were performing all these weird kind of calisthenics or single joint or single limb movements. But if you watch the clips, you watch them against the North American players, like, they were in terms of speed, in terms of power, they just completely dominated. And then, you hear kind of what the North American players would talk about what they would do during their off season. And it seemed like the big thing was they'd play a lot of golf, go fishing, and eat chicken wings and beer, or drink beer. So you can kind of really see the difference in terms of preparedness. So like, just to kind of go more to what is GPP. GPP essentially focuses on targeting the needs of an athlete in a non-sport specific manner. So by that, I mean biomechanically, so how they move, and the execution of the movements. So in the example here, I show a picture of a hockey player. All right. I'd like to see the number of times a player performs a stride during the season. It's probably astronomical. But anyways, what you'll see is the hockey players are very limited to this range of motion. All right. They just repeat it nonstop, because that's how they move around in their sport. So what you kind of see there is he gets good hip extension, but it's not full hip extension. If you look at the ankle, he doesn't get full dorsiflexion, and he doesn't get full knee flexion as well. And if you look at the equipment, right? If you've never felt a hockey skate, it's very hard. So their foot is basically trapped inside a boot. Now, if they're skating just constantly with this limited, say, range of motion, it could lead to a number of problems, such as tight hip flexors, as I mentioned, limited ankle dorsiflexion, being primarily a quad dominant because of the biomechanics of the skate being a little bit elevated on the heel. So there's more of a forward lean posture and emphasizing more of the quads. And then there's also a lot of core rotation. And then depending on, say, what side you play, let's say if you are a righty in hockey, well, there's a lot of leftward rotation and not as much rightward. So there may be an imbalance between the left and right sides. So as a coach, you should be looking at this and thinking, okay, I need to fix these issues. These athletes are coming to me after spending, say, 8-9 months doing these repetitive motions, not really thinking, and most of them aren't doing much strength work. So you need to address these issues right from the start. So some things that could be included, maybe polyquin split squats. All right, those are great to target the hip flexors, the ankle dorsiflexion, and the knee flexion. You can emphasize more of the posterior chain, as hockey players tend to be very weak, especially in the hamstrings. So by analyzing kind of the needs of the athlete, you're able to kind of use that to decide your exercise selection to target as many different needs with the least amount of exercises. So what about sport specificity? Now, there's no exercise that really fully mimics a person's sport besides the actual sport itself. So the aspect that is sport specific in GPP is that we're trying to develop specific capacities that should translate to their sport to improve general athleticism. Now, I could go on a whole nother rant about early specialization, such as kids, specializing in one sport at the age of 10, and how it's detrimental to their athletic performance. But that's a whole nother video in itself. Now, why is GPP important? GPP is the base of athletic foundation. All right. If you look at some of the best athletes, the ones that are the most impressive, they're the ones typically, let's say, the like wrestlers and gymnasts. The reason being is that they're exposed to many different movement patterns, and they have great coordination. So if you guys have never trained a hockey player, and if you do for the first time, don't ever ask them to run, because it is pretty embarrassing. They literally run or sprint like they skate, with the feet going side to side instead of in a straight line. GPP also helps increase an athlete's ability to recover. So GPP is typically maybe a more of an aerobic kind of metabolic form of training. So there's an increase in capillarization, which can help with waste removal, and it can help with the recovery between sessions, or later on in competition. It's also great for improving ligament, tendon, muscle strength, especially if there's an imbalance. So let's say, for hockey players, very quad dominant or posterior chain weak. So emphasizing a little bit more volume or a little bit more work on the posterior chain can balance out, let's say, the knee or the core. And also, by performing these non-specific exercises, you're preventing the potential for overuse injuries. Just because these athletes are they're very good at compensating. And by that, I mean, their bodies have become so efficient at producing or playing their sport that they most likely have developed poor movement patterns, just because that is what their body has found to be most efficient to perform their sport. So by performing these non-specific exercises, you're kind of getting them out of their shell and exposing all the soft tissues and the structures to different ranges of motion. So again, the case of a hockey player, if they're never really reaching full knee flexion, hip extension, or ankle dorsiflexion, well, that could potentially lead to, say, hip, knee, and ankle pains or injuries. So by performing these exercises that are not specific to the sport, you're exposing these tissues and therefore strengthening them in ranges of motion or in movements that they're not used to. So if they are exposed in a competition, the likelihood of injuries is greatly decreased. So basically, without GPP, and it's going back to the base of athletic foundation and kind of the reason for the pyramid, without GPP, you're limiting the athlete's base for development. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I have an athlete come to me after the season. All right. Most of the time they haven't trained or done any activity for 2 weeks. They come to me, they're deconditioned, they're weak, and they most likely have structural issues to fix. Now, me, maybe I don't know about GPP. I'm like, all right, we got 12 weeks. Let's go right into a strength phase. Let's go right into complexes. You're basically setting the athlete up for failure, because without this foundational base, those future methods or those future blocks, phases, whatever, won't be as beneficial or efficient. So the athlete won't get the greatest effect from those methods. And there's also the potential for injuries during those trainings. So, for example, if you see someone do, there's no, let's say for football or for sprinting, let's say there's no ankle preparation, there's no, say calf races, nothing to work on the ankle, the calf, and they go straight into heavy sled pushes. Well, there's a great risk of an Achilles tendon injury there. So just something to consider. GPP gives the athlete a solid foundation for them to grow as they progress through the off season. So what does the GPP phase look like? Say for an example, all right, for a hockey player, let's say the GPP phase is, let's say 3 weeks. All right. They may go through a rotation of 3 different days, 4 times within those 3 weeks. So the day 1 might be an upper body weight training, higher volume, just like a structural balance. So focusing on the shoulders, focusing on great ranges of motion. And then same thing on day 2 for the lower body. That's where you do unilateral work, maybe the agonist, antagonist, so quad, hamstring. And then the 3rd day may be like a low intensity full body conditioning and mobility. So performing like a sort of like an aerobic circuit, lots of sleds, some strongmen, say farmers carries, things to build up the athlete's conditioning. And this was something that I learned a lot about through reading Charlie Francis, some of his work. And he used a lot of tempo runs with his sprinters. And the reason for it was to build or to increase the capillarization, which could increase the blood supply as well as enable waste removal. But the big thing was for being able to provide a greater source of blood to the muscles. And the reason being, and I haven't seen any research or haven't heard about it talked about much besides Charlie Francis, but his theory was that the more blood or the more capillaries in the muscle, the more blood sent to the muscle. And with more blood sent, the muscle becomes warmer. All right. And this warmth helps with motor neuron conduction. So basically the warmth increases the abilities of motor neuron to transduce its signals. So long story short, greater capillarization, greater blood supply, the motor neurons become warmer. There's more warmth and they're able to fire more quickly, and therefore, resulted in faster sprint times. So, it's a lot of information, but the general story or the general point of the presentation is, I know the GPP phase may be a little bit boring, unilateral work. There's nothing fancy about it. but for the sake of our athletes, we need to include it, especially at the start. And let's say for a younger athlete, it could be longer, but for the majority of our clients and our athletes, we need to include a short, let's say 2 to 3 week GPP phase to recondition our athletes and to build up the tissues and to form more of a balanced structure to, one, prevent injuries and to increase their athletic base to maximize future methods and trainings. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any questions about GPP or any of the other presentations, my emails are there. My Instagram's there. Please don't hesitate to send me an email or a DM. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.